Welcome, 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 everybody, to another Sunday of When Black Women Gather. My name is Helen Higginbotham. I am the founder of this organization, and we gather here on Sundays to discuss issues and topics that are relevant mostly to Black women, but often to the community as a whole. Right now, with all that's happening, all issues, I think, are relevant to us as a whole. Wherever we can find spaces to come together, that's what we need to be doing. So, welcome and thank you all for coming this Sunday. I am, you know that we're recording, and I want you to, oops, this will be on Facebook, so you can grab it later. We are going to hear from our guests, and then we will have a Q&A afterwards. So right now, I'm going to bring Nya Patrino on platform with, and I'll be going away. Y'all be talking to her. Hi, Nya.
Hey,
Uh-oh.
everybody.
Hi,
I,
how are you this afternoon?
I'm great. I'm really honored to be here. And I wanted to say I'm Naya, and I'm the daughter of Dolores, very strong Black woman, who's the daughter of Anna, who's the daughter of Daisy. Some other really important relatives I want to mention. I'm the sister of Lois. I'm the
Yes.
cousin of Lucretia, Dee, and Francine. And they're all really incredibly important to me. And I love the idea of when Black women gather. And I've been gathering with those really strong, beautiful Black women that I'm so honored to be related to. So I'm going to share with you
Wait a
some.
minute, real quick. Let me just tell you, so she's told you who she is. Let me tell you that Naya and I guess we're like sisters and cousins or something, because Lois and I go way, way back. So thank you, Lois, for sharing your sister with us today. But before she gets started, let me give her accolades. First of all, the name of the program today is Nine Ships, a second middle passage, and Naya will explain to us what that means. And she's going to explain it to us through her art, through folk tales, through scriptures, and just lots of ways that we'll be able to receive it, and you'll catch it. This phone is making noise. Sorry. And you'll be able to really visualize. She takes you to a place that's really wonderful. And that's because of what she does. So Naya centered her art on giving voice to the voiceless, telling the stories of people and places that have been forgotten and or left unexplored, and reinterpreting religious texts, myths, and folk tales through a modern lens. As an artist and designer, Naya explores spirituality, identity and cultural intersections, history, memory, light, wind, climate, temperature, the moon, the stars, and all from the tapestry of her artistry, weaving together to chronicle a cohesive story. Naya received an Emmy nomination in art direction and set decoration for the TV series Transparent. Look at her website, y'all. We'll drop it in the link. She's done a lot of sets for programs that I'm sure you've watched. So that's fascinating too. Um, and she has an MFA from the University of California, San Diego, and she's working on another degree because Black women just never stop. So I just wanted to give you a little background on who she is, and thank you again. And for those of you who weren't here, we're going to let her talk, do her thing, and then please drop questions in the chat as she's speaking, and we'll circle back. And Lois, I'll be asking you to help me make sure that we grab all the questions for your sister. All righty, Naya, it's all yours.
Okay, so I'm going to share with you some in-process work through a slide deck that I'm doing about nine ships. And then the work has come to me over time, and it's still very much in process, but I think process is pretty exciting. So I'll just share it with you. We can talk. And in the end, like Helen said, I'll answer questions. Okay, I'm going to do Control L. So the first time I presented this work was a couple months ago for CIIS, where my sister Lois is getting her PhD. And so it has a little bit of a headier title called Nine Ships, A Visual Crossed and Entangled History of Enslaved Africans Across Two Middle Passages. A monument to sunken slave ships sits on the ocean floor near Key West. It was placed there by the National Association of Black Scuba Divers in collaboration with the Mel Fisher Maritime Museum. And it reads, Henrietta Marie, in memory and recognition of the courage, pain, and suffering of enslaved African people. Speak her name and gently touch the souls of her ancestors. And the ships that I'm talking about tonight are not the Henrietta Marie, but the Henrietta Marie was the ship that brought me to this, find out about these other nine ships. And the phrase, speak her name and gently touch the souls of our ancestors, is a really important phrase, statement, acknowledgement that sat in my heart. And so I made this broadside, this letterpress, you could call it a poster, a print. I have a number of them still saying, speak her name and gently touch the souls of our ancestors. And then this is some of the type that I used to set this poster. And if people, probably other people other than me, sometimes you hear something and it resonates so strongly that you want to make something. So this is one of the first things I made at the International Printing Museum in Los Angeles. So the act prohibiting the importation of slaves of 1807 is a United States federal law that prohibits the importation of slaves into the United States. It took effect in January 1, 1808. So I was saying before, I'll say it again, somehow in my understanding of enslavement, until this project, it really didn't quite understand that there was a date where people were allegedly no longer allowed to be captured from Africa, and that enslavement was an inside job. It was people were born into slavery in the United States, and there was a law, but we'll find out in this work that it wasn't followed. So in the spring of 1860, more than 50 years after the transatlantic slave trade was declared illegal, not slavery, just the transatlantic part of it, three unrelated slave ships quietly departed from New York to West Africa. So not from the South, but from the North. And one of my dreams is, or it's not a dream, I'm going to make it a reality, is some of this work I'm going to make into big abstract sails, and I'm going to put them into New York Harbor. Maybe people can help me with that. From New York, a city often imagined as distant from slavery and profits. So this is an image of New York Harbor. And maybe in 1860, maybe some of these ships we're looking at here actually have fake books, say they're doing one thing, and in fact, they're doing the okey doke, and they're going to West Africa to capture people. So I found that image the same year. So the names of the ships that I'm going to talk about tonight, three of the nine are the William, the Wildfire, and the Bogota. And I just played with some designs. I'm very influenced from Veve, uh, from Haiti, Caribbean art form. There's a sea god Agwe that looks a bit like this. And I took the shapes of the boats because they are historically documented and started to fuse them with these Veve forms. So that's the Wildfire. That's the Bogota. This is another piece I made with laser cut an image of the Bogota, and it's very influenced by Agwe. And then these are just the first look at maybe what a wallpaper or wrapping paper or something with those two ships. I don't have all three yet in my process. I did this in Key West in the artist residency. And then I brought all three together and I made this edition. It's cut and linocut linoleum. And it's a process called reduction printing where you print a block and then you carve away a little bit more. You put another color on it. You carve it a little bit more and you put another color. So this is a three-part reduction print of the three ships, the William, the Wildfire, and the Bogota. And I made it as a gift for the Day of Remembrance in Key West. I sent it to some people there when they remember enslavement in Key West. So, just to recap where we're at, in December 1859, the American bark Wildfire cleared New York for the African coast, with its double book saying it was going to do one thing, going to enslave people, and not really being honest about that. Then the William, in September of 1859, another ship sailed from New York to Havana, and then from there, the Congo. And then the Bogota also left New York for West Africa. The three ships, three of my nine. And if you get to ever go to Key West, where I was artist in residence, in the museum there, the Mel Fisher Museum, and they were very nice. They let me go in and out as I pleased. Have this model of the William. So that ship. So these ships, and I think I've already said it, but I'll just say it again because it's a complicated story, plan to enslave people in West Africa and sell them in Cuba, where enslaved labor powered the sugar economy. And the United States both coveted and sought to disrupt as part of its imperial ambitions to annex the island. So in that moment, and even in moments right now, US has a complicated relationship with Cuba, and in 1860 they were hoping to annex it. And so one of the ways they wanted to annex it was they were going to disrupt uh, the economy by disrupting the ships of enslaved Africans who were coming in to work the sugar. So these are some pencil drawings that I've done of sugarcane, because in order to make textile patterns or surface design patterns, which I do, you need a lot of elements. They're called motifs. So usually I think I need at least about 9 things to make a pattern. So I drew these first in pencil, and then here's them in repeat. Here's just like the basic pattern. And then here's where you're seeing a 2 by 2, they call it, more of the pattern. So I just said, okay, is this going to work? Let me play with it in pencil. And at another point, I did some watercolor over those drawings, the method I do where you print on watercolor paper and then I paint back into it. And then you'll see this pattern of the sugar cane um, as a textile or surface design. So now I'm back to the story. So on March 21, 1860, the Wildfire crew unloaded its looking glasses, mirrors, and muskets along the Congo River and transferred control of the bark to several Spanish sailors, some of whom had come as passengers from New York and others who had boarded there on the Congo River. And that night, Stanhope and Hutchinson's New York crew worked with Miguel Macias, Antonio Covas, and at least 8 other Spanish sailors to forcibly load Francisco, Constancia, Antonio, Amelia, Salvador, Maria, and 644 boys, girls, men, and women onto the Wildfire. And we know this, you'll find out later, we know the names of a number of these enslaved people. These are their names. Harper's Weekly goes and does an interview I'll talk about later and talk to these people who are captured. So we know some of their names. And so if anybody's been to Key West or hasn't, this is the African cemetery in Key West, where a number of the people that we're going to talk about were buried. And it has this map of Africa, where our 3 ships left from. And then you'll see it here, and then other maps. And I'll tell you a little bit later why this is in Key West. But this is just to reinforce we had these 3 ships left New York, came to West Africa, came to different places in West Africa, illegally enslaved people, taking them to Cuba to work the sugar plantations. And then I was kind of interested. Most of the people they said came from along the Congo River. So I was just looking at the shape of this river, this in and out of it. What does it mean? And then I just started to play with some forms. This is block printing on newsprint. I did. I was an artist in residence in Cornwall. A lot of slave ships left from Falmouth and Cornwall. I was able to write a proposal to do some work there and look around and some more kind of things inspired by the Congo River as a pattern for a textile or flooring or wallpaper. And then I also looked back at some of this origins of these glyphs. I can see this curve pattern in here. I just kind of play with it, some loose sketching. I like to make a lot of backgrounds of different reds. I wanted to really use red for the color of the sea instead of blue because of the blood that's in the Mother Atlantic of all the people who died in Middle Passage and just the horror. So here me just trying to find all kinds of different red textures, red patterns. This is when I was the artist in residence in Key West. And then here are some of these different reds that I came up with. I think this is the red here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, that I really sort of felt like it was the red that I liked the most. And then I was just playing with that river, just real rough. This is more in Illustrator, more a vector way of looking at it as a pattern, and then thinking, oh, could this be on cloth? Could this be on clothing? Could this be art? What would that look like? Congo River. This is my sketchbook. I like to draw a lot on brown paper. Me just looking at some designs. You see these designs, the Congo River, carving some blocks of it. And then I use these blocks, I think in the next, well, I'll show you later. You'll see some of this stuff. Also, when I was in Key West, I was looking at Cuba cloth, and I love these kind of diamond forms in them. It really spoke to me. And oh, here's me doing some block printing on fabric with the designs from before, looking at the diamonds. Then in the monument in Key West at the African Cemetery, they have all these Indinka symbols. And one that really spoke to me was this interlocking diamonds that says you are, which means you are not the property of the one whose handcuffs you wear. And that just seems so important to me. And I said, I've got to use this diamonds. You are not the property of the one whose handcuffs you wear. And here you see, this is like more of a digital work that I made from it with the background that I told you like. And then this is just me playing with batik. And this is outside of Pittsburgh, seeing what I could do with this pattern. You know, this is all in process. I'll do some more with it later, but this is where it is now. So West Africa to Cuban coast. In the years 1859 and 1860, illegal slavers loaded nearly 53,000 enslaved Africans, many from the Congo River Basin, for delivery to thriving markets in Cuba. Indeed, one newspaper reported that as the wildfire left the African coast, remember the wildfire is one of our ships, there were 14 American vessels waiting for cargoes of Negroes. In addition to American slavers, two Spanish armed steamers were also waiting at the Congo River for cargoes of 1,500 Negroes, each bound for Cuba. Newspaper reports of successful slave landings in Cuba were frequent. By 1860, Cuba was the home of 1,400 sugar mills producing 450,000 tons of crystal, 25% of the world's annual supply. Nearly 370,000 slaves were engaged in its production. More were needed. Many of the slave ships that sailed from the African coast in Cuba were American owned. Despite US laws making human trafficking an act of piracy punishable by death, the temptation was too strong for some to avoid. Traders could buy low in Africa and sell high in Cuba, making so much money it overshadowed the risk of capture. And a lot of this stuff is going to be from Corey Malcolm, and he's like librarian in residence in the library in Key West. And he was so patient. He sat and talked to me about a lot of things. He's kind of cute too, I have to admit. Okay, and these are Celtic symbols for a lot of things, but there's a Celtic symbol of water. And because I said that my work was about crossed and entangled histories, I also, besides Indigenous symbols, I wanted to look at some other symbols. So when I think of Mother Atlantic, who does it belong to? So this is just some work, it's really a study on newsprint of a block print. I carved that block. And then this is some different colors with the same block and just texts about the journey. I like to write a lot. I like to spatter a lot. And then these are some pieces. They're not done. I want to do some embroidery in them. I'm hoping I'll finish them by the end of May because I want to try to enter for an exhibition. But there are pieces about drowning in Middle Passage. There's people drowning or jumping into the water, which is my sister's most famous poem, and they jumped into the water some. So some pieces about that. This is a new piece. It's very long. I made it this spring. If you've seen this presentation the last time, I didn't have it. It's a very long piece inspired by Kara Walker of people again drowning or jumping into the water. But I had this epiphany in yoga. I get a lot of these ideas in yoga. I said, what if all the people at the bottom of the sea, all our ancestors, were actually there to catch us? As because there's so many bodies of our ancestors on the Atlantic, in Mother Atlantic, on the what if as we fell in the water, our others were there to catch us? So this is like I have to make this in textiles. Right now it's just in paper on the wall in Philly. And all this blackness you can see here, it actually has more and more bodies, people either kneeling or with their arms up or lying on the sea floor. So now I'm back to the African cemetery in Key West, which gives us a lot of information. It shows you where the ships that left New York and then went to the West Africa and then coming to Cuba. They never got to Cuba. They just got off the coast of Cuba and then they were intercepted by US ships because the US ships didn't want them to get to Cuba because they want to disrupt the economy, the sugar economy, because they want to annex the island. So want to kind of set it into turmoil. This is a big picture of the African cemetery in Key West, where you see Cuba here, and then Africa's there, and then the names of some of our ships. They have 6 ships here. They leave out the last 3. I can understand why, because it makes the story very sad, but I'm going to share with you more than they'll share. So in May 1858, the Secretary of State, Lewis Cass, complained to President James Buchanan about the forcible detention and search of American vessels by British armed ships of war in the Gulf of Mexico and adjacent seas. So besides also wanting to annex the island, the US people were also mad that the British were sort of around Mexico and around Cuba, and they were searching American vessels, and they didn't feel like they had the right to do that. That they didn't, Britain didn't have authority of the US. So there's talk about that. And because of that, because of wanting to annex Cuba and also kind of being pissed at Britain, there was a mobilization of US naval vessels to the water off of Cuba in 1858, and then was less an effort to suppress the slave trade than to combat the offensive actions of the British Navy there. So they put the vessels there. They said they're trying to intercept the slave trade, but they're really, it's a okey doke. They're trying to do some other stuff. This is a piece. This is the drawing, kind of digital piece I did in Key West about Middle Passage. I wanted to abstract it lying in the save ship. And then this is a piece that I'm working on, the same piece, but in fabric of all the bodies. And then I have them like sharing arms and sharing legs in these rows. And on the bottom of this piece, I'm hoping to embroider, speak their names and gently speak her name and gently touch the souls of her ancestors. I think here you can see it here in the distance. So, you know, it's in process. This is what it wants to look like. More important to Buchanan, his newfound concern in suppressing the slave trade to Cuba allowed him to justify the longstanding proposal to annex the neighboring island, a plan he had publicly endorsed years before, but which he had failed to win widespread support. In his second annual message delivered in December 1858, Buchanan urged the recent past to portray the urgent need for Cuban annexation. This is a piece, they're like three separate pieces, really, but just to get the idea, because it's a color, what we call colorways, of an idea of triangle trade where I'm connecting North America to Africa, and some other people have done that too. Instead of South America, I put Africa down there. And here's the Caribbean, and then I threw England, I threw the UK in the Caribbean too, because these are the people, the countries that are intersecting, that are committing atrocities, crimes against humanity, and I put them together in this piece or these series of pieces. Cuban coast to Key West. So if we're back in the story, we had these three ships that I'm interested in, William, Wildfire, and Bogota, go with their enslaved people to Cuba. Here they are off of Cuba, different sides of the island, and then they're intercepted by the US ships. That's where we are in the story. And here is just a block print I was working on. I'll clean it up in a future about drops of water as tears, the tears of Mother Atlantic, and some more the tears, seashells with some spattering. Our cruisers have been very successful. This is a US person saying, our cruisers have been very successful late in the search after the slavers, which infest the Cuban coast, and have already captured three vessels with over 1,500 Negroes. The prizes were all taken to Key West, and their cargoes, I guess that's us, the cargoes, landed with their cargoes. So once um, these ships are intercepted by the US military, in Cuba, they're taken to the closest point, which is Key West. But the issue is Key West, I think, had very few people at the time, like maybe 4,000 people. And when our ships come, one of the issues is like 1,500 more people all of a sudden on the island. Like the population is getting close to double. So such an accession to the population of that place caused the authorities no little trouble to provide suitable accommodations for them. But by activity and energy and by calling forth every available resource, in a few days we're all comfortably, though roughly housed. And this is somebody else saying it. I don't really believe they're comfortably housed, but that was the talk. So the boats that intercepted our original boats have names, and they're called the Crusader, the Winnedote, and the Mohawk, the USS Crusader, the USS Winnedote, and the USS Mohawk. The US Navy intercepted the vessels. More than 1,000 African men, women, and children were removed from the ships and transported to Key West, Florida, a place already steeped in slavery and racial violence. So it's interesting, when I was in Key West, even African American people there had this idea that there was no slavery on Key West or no enslavement, but it's not true. Key West it's in Florida. There was slavery there. It's documented. The big forts on Key West were built by enslaved people. So if somebody tries to tell you there was no slavery in Key West, it's not true. This is a really early image, even before I had this project of trying to make a damask with a slave ship and chains. So it's just kind of a thought, a process. I'll do more with it in the future. Periodically, since the ban of the American involvement in the transatlantic slave trade took effect in 1808, ships carrying illicit human cargo have been seized in US ports under various circumstances. Lawmakers who crafted the 1807 law that prohibited American involvement in the trade had debated the fate of enslaved Africans who might find themselves on US soil after having been smuggled across the sea. Would they become free or remain enslaved once rescued by authorities? So that's going to start to become a question, right? So we got these people from Africa, intercepted their boats, the boats they were enslaved on, off of Cuba, bring them to Florida. Are they now enslaved? Are they free? What happens to them? Was the US government obliged to make a home for the recaptives within its borders? And most perplexing of all, to what extent was the federal government responsible for the well being of recaptured Africans, many of them whom would arrive in southern ports? The 1807 Act settled these questions by allowing states to sell or dispose of captured cargoes as they wished. Thus, rather than taking the politically untenable position of either emancipating recaptives or enslaving, apprenticing, or selling them itself, the federal government left the fate of recaptives to the votes of various state legislators. Okay, where am I? Okay, I've showed you this before. So we're just looking again, our three ships. And I want to focus on right now this one ship, the USS Winnedote. And I found some different pictures of it because I was trying to, even though I'm abstracting the ships, I'm trying to really know what they look like to start with. So I want to tell you about the story with the Winnedote. On May 9th, 1860, the U.S. steamer Winnedote seized another slaver, the William. The Winnedote's entry to Key West was relayed in the July 14th, 1860 issue of the Friends Intelligencer. A woman on the Winnedote, and this is so, to me, moving, a woman on the Winnedote sang a lament about her home and her children. So this woman on the ship, this enslaved African woman, is singing about her lost children, her lost home, when out of nowhere, people heard distant voices sing the song back to her. So I'm just going to now watch me now. She is singing this song about the loss of her children, this song that she knows, and all of a sudden she hears across the sea people singing the song back to her. This continued as the Winnedote approached the shore. Upon docking, the woman learned that those were the voices of her children who had already been liberated from another slaver, according to the Friends Intelligencer. And when the mother was reunited with her children on the shore of Key West, people of all races were in tears. So she's singing this song across the sea, somebody's singing the song back to her. And when she gets on the shore, she finds out her children have been singing this song back to her. So I said, okay, I'm just going to play with this Winnedote and musical notes, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I have this Veve image with a snake. Maybe I'm going to make the snake the G clef. I'm pasting it on here. Maybe I'm going to make the water the musical notes of the song she's singing. Here I'm going to, I don't know, I'm going to like carve it. And then this is like a carving of the Winnedote. This is the boat, the Mohawk, another interceptor. And this is a carving, a 2-block reduction print of the Mohawk. And of course, like I said, the sea is red, the red of the blood. This is another version of it, but this is my preferred. And then this is a Crusader. I haven't made any block prints of this yet. I just have this little sketch. I'll get somewhere with it, with that Agwe sea god style. And then this is just me looking. I've had to go through all this reference to find out what the ships look like. And then you see I'm trying to mirror it, but I'm abstracting it. Of course, the arrival of a ship full of hundreds of people, many sick and all need of food and water and clothing, was a significant event. But because these people were native Africans, people not typically encountered by those in the States, their arrival was also a spectacle. May Stacy visited the wildfire, and his report to his father on what he saw is a rare firsthand account of the conditions of slave ship and the suffering of its victims. Well, I have visited the slaver. It was a sight which those who have not seen can form no idea of whatever. It was disgusting in all the senses. In the first place, your nose was offended. at an infernal stench that pervaded the craft. Throughout, your ears were filled with a chatter that resembled more the concert of 1,000 monkeys than a language of human beings. So this is one thing I'm going to make a block print about maybe next weekend. Now that I'm back in LA, this is the phrase that, oh, it makes me so angry that I have to print it. Filled with a chatter that resembled the concert of 1,000 monkeys. It's going to be in print. Key West, just some water I did another time. The first Africans arrived in Key West in April the 30th, and by May 4th, a 3-acre compound had been enclosed within that area, a wooden barracks. It's a concentration camp, really. A hospital, a kitchen, and quarters for guards were built. The complex, the Barracoons, was located on the beach near Fort Taylor, and Fort Taylor is one of those forts that enslaved Africans built. So we know about this, have so much information because Harper's Weekly went down there and they documented what they saw. And this picture, which we see all the time, and I've seen it many times in books, and I wondered, like, I never thought, why are all these people on deck, right? If they're enslaved, what are they doing on the deck? And the fact is because this is the intercepted wildfire, and they're getting taken to, they're, docked in Key West, and that's why they're on deck. So here's the Harper's Weekly article that you can see and why we have so much information about the wildfire. This is it's docked in Key West. This is the, on board, the conditions people were in. And I'm going to go by that. Okay, let's go here. They sat very close together, mostly on either side of the vessel, forward and aft, leaving a narrow open space along the line of the center for the crew of the vessel to pass to and fro. And about 50 of them were full-grown young men, and about 400 were boys aged from 10 to 16. We saw on board about 6 or 7 boys and men greatly emaciated and diseased, past recovery, and about 100 that showed decided evidence of suffering from exhaustion, from disease. Dysentery was the principal disease, but notwithstanding their sufferings, we could not be otherwise than interested and amused by their strange looks, motions, and actions. Oh my God. Okay. And then the well ones looked happy and content and were ready at any moment to join in a song or dance, whether they were directed to do so by Jack. So this Jack really sticks in my mind. Jack, a little fellow as black as ebony and about 12 years old, having a handsome and expressive face, an intelligent look, and sparkling eye. The sailors on the voyage had dressed Jack in a sailor costume and had made him a great pet. And when we were on board, Jack carried about in his hand a short cord, not only as an emblem, but also an instrument of his brief, delegated authority. He would make the men and boys stand up, sit down, sing or dance, just as he directed. And when they sang, Jack moved around among them as light as a cat and beat the time by slapping his hands together. As if any refused to sing or sang out of time, Jack's cord descended on their backs. Their singing was monotonous. The words we did not understand. We can rarely see a more happy and merry looking fellow than Jack. I'm not sure I believe it, but I think of when I look at the pictures of Harper's Weekly, to me, this is Jack. I feel like this is Jack. I'm not sure, but for me, it's Jack. I made some sketches of him. I made a vector drawing. I print on the laser cutter, and then I just did some painting and spattering and stuff on Jack as if he was copper that's getting a lot of patina. A number of these Negroes, perhaps 12 or 15 in all, had more or less at about Luanda, a Portuguese town on the coast, and had learned to speak a little Portuguese. Through an interpreter, we learned from some of them that some 4 or 5, perhaps more, but probably not many, had been baptized at the Roman Catholic missionary station in Luanda. Francisco, a young man, says he was baptized by a Franciscan friar in Luanda, and he was a slave in Africa. and does not wish to return there. He says he'd rather be a slave to the white man in this country. So I just play with Francisco a little bit. Salvador, a bright looking, smart lad, had been baptized. Constancia said she had been baptized in Loando. She does not remember her father. She was stolen away when she was young and was sold by her brother. Antonio and Amelia were both fine looking young women, aged about 20, and were both baptized in Loando. Maria, a pagan, unbaptized, aged about 20, had obtained among the white people here who visit the quarters the name the Princess on account of her fine personal appearance and the deference that seemed to be paid to her by some of her companions. Just playing with Maria, the princess. I'll go back. I think I did some better stuff later, but these were the first kind of looks of it. The persons we have mentioned, including some 8 or 10 others, evidently do not belong to the same tribe. The rest do. Indeed, the whole number is evidently taken from different tribes living in the interior of Africa, but the greater number are Congos. The president, on receiving the news of the capture of the wildfires, sent a special message to Congress. The expenditure for the Africans captured on board the wildfire will not be less than $100,000 and may considerably exceed that sum. And in the Harper's article, I'm just always moved, saddened, I don't know, dismayed by the faces of what these people, our people, have already gone through. Just all their head on their hands. So I've done some sketches of that, and this is the sketch here that we saw came into Jack. But I want to do some other work based on these sketches of just already endured so much. So the residents of Key West organized and they helped to build this barracoons. At the time, Maroon County, made up largely of Key West, held 451 enslaved individuals. Congress records from 1860 showed that the enslaved population exceeded the county's 160 free Black men and women. So it's kind of interesting. So you got on Key West 451 enslaved African or African Americans, 560 free Blacks, and then these 1,500 other people who just hit the island. And this imbalance stemmed apart from appeals made from the United States Army Corps of Engineers during the 1840s and 50s, urging local slaveholders to supply enslaved labor for the construction of Fort Taylor and Fort Jefferson, projects that commenced in about 1845 and 47. And I talked about that a little bit. There's this story. I don't know, I'm going so long, so I might leave some of this out. There's a story in a book called Key West Tales. I actually got this book out of the library because it was called Key West Tales. I didn't really even know I was going to work on this project. At the time, I was going to work on the Henrietta Marie, and I was just reading on the plane, and I got to this story called Just Like You and Me. And Mr. Asia M. Tiff had a tough mind, and Mrs. Asia M. Tiff has a tender heart. Both have sharp tongues. They have been quarreling into the night. This is the reason for their dissension. 10 days ago, the gunboats USS Mohawk and USS Winnedote escorted into Key West Harbor 2 slave ships that had been captured in the waters north of Cuba, the William and the Wildfire, carrying both altogether 300 candidates for slavery, both male and female, including numerous children. A party of the Engineer Corps based at Fort Taylor under the captain of Hunt has fenced in a barracoon to hold the Negroes until it can be determined what to do with them. And with remarkable speed, after that, Captain Hunt's carpenters have thrown up a crude dormitory comprising nine rooms, 25 feet by 25 feet in size, each of which approximately 35 Negroes sorted according to age are, as Mrs. Tift will have it, incarcerated. Mrs. Tift early became aware of the pitiable state of these human souls, just like you and me, as she keeps referring to the captives to her husband's annoyance. Recently, Mr. Tiff learned that his wife, without asking his permission, has banded together with the wives of the Messieurs, Mallory, Bethel, and Mulrennan, and perhaps other, to press the engineers to build a hospital and some other things. So we'll come back to that. So the conditions were overcrowded, unsanitary, and lethal. Disease spread rapidly through the encampments, and nearly 295 Africans died in Key West alone. So they died in Middle Passage, they died in Key West, and the death rate from the Wildfire and William passengers continued unabated during their captivity. And it speaks to those conditions of the barracoons, which were not very good. This is a drawing of the basically concentration camp that the people from our 3 ships were living in. So the first burial on Key West of our enslaved Africans, the first burial was a child 6 weeks old whose young mother was barely in her teens. Her devotion to her offspring made her an object of much sympathy to the visitors of the camp, and upon the death of the child, our people provided a handsome coffin to bury it. The interment took place some distance from the barracoon, and the Africans were allowed to be present at the services, where they performed their native ceremony. Weird chants were sung, mingled with loud wails of grief and mournful moans from the 100 throats, until the coffin was lowered into the grave, when at once the chanting stopped and perfect silence reigned, and the Africans marched back to the barracoon without a sound. And here's back to our story, Just Like You and Me, by John Hersey. The baby has died, and Mrs. Tift has made it her business to have this, the first death among the captives, announced in the Gazette. The morning after her altercation with her husband, in other words, 2 days ago, Mrs. Tift went straight back to the hospital shed in the barracoon, carrying a jug of milk and some soft clothes to serve as the nappies. She found the mother sitting on the floor exactly as she had been the previous day, leaning against a stud of the wall, hugging her baby and gently caressing its cheeks. Mrs. Tift saw at once that something was amiss, and that without even touching the infant, Dr. Whitehurst said, "It's no longer with us." He leaned forward to take the baby from the mother's arms, but the child mother clutched the tiny corpse in her bosom and began to scream. For 6 hours, she fiercely refused to give it up, and then Mrs. Tift heard later it was taken from her forcefully. The captives gathered around the 6-foot deep grave, which was dug yesterday by a squad of able bodied male captives. Reverend Simon Peter Richardson of the Methodist Episcopal Church South stands at the head of the pit, and he sonorously says, "Brothers and sisters, we are gathered here." Now he pauses, evidently feeling that he is not being given due respect by the Negroes, for some female voices have begun to make a strange wailing sound, which soon took a curious turn towards melody. Men's voices join in. Some throats cry out in prolonged moans. Reverend Richardson is looking aghast. The singing grows louder and louder. Bare feet rise and fall, slapping the ground in time with the insistent, repetitious throbbing of what would sound to the townspeople's ears like a chorus of irrepressible joy, were it not for the unearthly moans that punctuate and underline the song. There's a terrible radiance in the pulsating music, and we see the captives dipping, turning, and stamping, their limbs resonating to the sounds that thrum from their chests. The emotion in their song and in their swaying is palpable, soaring, ferocious. But to the people of Key West, it's deeply enigmatic. To Reverend Richardson, it appears to be blasphemous. And with wild gestures, he commands that the coffin be lowered forthwith into the pit. The forebears themselves singing, "Pick it up. It's a light thing." And with Reverend Richardson waving his arms over them, almost as if they were conducting the unbearable heathen music, They literally throw the box into the hole. And at that moment, as if cut by a huge machete, the chant stops. There's complete stillness, without a word, without a whisper, an appalling stillness. The Negroes turn and start walking back to their captivity. Again, the barracoons, that's a story just like you and me. Um, I want to go a little further. In the early 19th century, Black life in Key West was tightly regulated. Both free and enslaved Africans were subject to curfews and other restrictions, including an ordinance forbidding them from being outdoors or making noise after 9 o'clock at night. This rule was adopted in 1832 by the town's first governing council. The US military claimed to fear that residents, okay, this is kind of, I'll just tell you, the reason they said that they needed to um, put these people, fence in these people, barracoon these people, enslaved Africans, was they're afraid that the local people would steal them and sell them into slavery. So they needed to, one of the rationales was imprison them so they wouldn't be stolen and sold. So here even you see the guards guarding the camps, not really as much guarding people from leaving as trying to prevent people from coming in. So there was a debate again in Congress about what should be done with the people. And President Buchanan felt that the law was clear that they should be sent to Liberia. So after a debate by Congress, a resolution was passed and expenditures were appropriated and contracts were negotiated with the American Colonization Society for transportation of these refugees to Liberia. So in June, 3 ships left New York for Key West to carry our enslaved ancestors to Africa, to Liberia. So these are ships 7, 8, and 9 of the 9 ships. So there was debate, but at the end they go back to Africa, but they don't go back to where they're from. So what would follow was not emancipation, but a deportation. The US government decided the survivors would be transported to Liberia, a colony established for repatriated Africans, regardless of where they were actually from. 3 months after their quote rescue, the survivors were forced to cross the Atlantic yet again, this time on ships ill supplied with food, medical care, or adequate provisions. So hunger, weakness, and disease defined the voyage. We're going to see we had people die from Africa to Cuba. Tremendous amount of people died in Key West. And now the second middle passage, we have a great number of people die. The violence didn't end there. Roughly 1/3 of the remaining survivors died during the passage back to Africa. So this is the second middle passage. The 3 new ships that we're meeting are called the Crusader, the Star of the Union, and the Castilian. Francisco Maria and the others disembarking the Castilian and Robertsport must have viewed the tragedy of their ordeal in terms of painful, simple fact. For New England shipbuilders, New York merchants, and Cuban plantation owners alike, their blood was the treasure. And this is just those ships traveling back and forth and back and forth, the journeys. Though saved from servitude in Cuba by the US Navy, they were neither free nor safe under federal law in Key West, and Congress had made it clear that there was no room for them in the United States for boatloads of Africans enslaved or free. Only here in Liberia, far from the complexities of American racial politics and sectional rivalry, and far from their homes in Angola, were there African liberators' captors willing to perform the legal wizardry necessary to convert them back from commodities into human beings. These are some of the ships that from Key West to Africa. This is me kind of working on a batik of that. In June 1860, Francisco Mari and 376 other Central African prisoners, sobbing piteously at the prospect before them, left crowded, disease-infested coastal barracoons to face an equally horrific sight anchored offshore. The 1,250-ton Castilian, a floating hell of dysentery, dropsy, and scurvy, which would claim the lives, I already said that, of nearly one-third during the 2-month Atlantic crossing. Unlike most transatlantic journeys Africans experienced in the 19th century, theirs would be a kind of middle passage in reverse. From the United States to West Africa, running counter to their first Atlantic voyage aboard the Wildfire, just weeks before as the captives in illegal slave trade from the Congo River to Cuba, Francisco and Mario were two of nearly 3,000 enslaved U.S. naval vessels sealed from enslaved Africans, U.S. naval vessels seized from slave ships in 1860, more than in any other year. And this is the eve of the Civil War. Illegal when it began, lethal when it paused, devastating when it ended, this episode lays bare the greed, hypocrisy, and imperial logic of a nation that outlawed the slave trade while continuing to move Black bodies across oceans by force, by confinement, and by decree. These are some of the pieces just lying on the table, some of the early Middle Passage pieces. This is the Castilian. This is a photograph I found of it. And this is just, I think, the Crusader and me just looking at what I'm going to do with it. This, again, the Crusader, a picture I found and like me kind of abstracting it. This is the South Shore. It's another boat, another of the boats that sent people back to Africa, not where they were from. And what's interesting, the Star of the Union, one of the ships that people from Key West were sent to Africa on, is actually in the Liberian flag. So this ship, the Star of the Union, right here, took some of our people from Key West to Liberia. And this is my batik of the Star of the Union. In June 29th, Francisco and 375 other prisoners had arrived together 8 weeks before in the Wildfire, somberly marched with the crowded, disease-infested barracoons of Whitehead Point toward another transatlantic passage. Of the 400 on board the Castilian, a government-chartered A1 clipper out of New York, 100 were ill as the ship pulled anchor. Disease decimated the passengers who suffered from confinement on ship, the absence of vegetable food. They didn't put any vegetables on the ship. And nearly 29%, 115 people of the Castilian's passengers died before reaching Liberia. On August 27th, anchored off the Liberian coast, survivors of the transatlantic passage boarded the small boats lining the Castilian's deck and headed into the heavy surf towards their new home. So not only did they not put them the same places in Liberia, even if you had made a friend in the barracoons, they separated them. They put them in 3 very different places in Liberia because they felt like the country couldn't accept so many people in one place. And then on shore, they were renamed and registered by the American Colonization Society officials. There was no record of a Francisco, a Constancia, Antonia, Amelia, Salvador, or Maria landing in Robertsport, only those with names fit for American given people. So now they're renamed, and their names now are Andrew Jackson, Amanda Clay, Sarah Cass, Nancy Pope, John Adams, Laura Wilson, and 303 others, many with similar names. So they got renamed. And then this is a piece. These are pieces that I'm working on. They're very large. We're not very large, but of the journey. I've gotten 2 done. I did these at the Center for the Book. They were too ambitious, but then a woman there who was near me, Kel, said she would help me. She helped me make these broadsides. So Francisco, Luandan boatman, baptized, spoke English, French, and Portuguese, enslaved, forced aboard the Wildfire, captured by the Mohawk, imprisoned in Key West, deported to Liberia on the Castilian. Amelia, baptized in Luanda, enslaved, forced aboard the Wildfire, captured by the Mohawk, imprisoned in Key West, deported to Liberia on the Castilian. I have a number of these. If anybody's interested in them, I put some of them on my Etsy store. This is the type. I mean, it's really backwards, but I mirrored it so you could read it. Like me setting the type, you have to do it on this composing tray. You have to tie it up. It took me, a couple weeks on and off to set it. So you have to put this little note in it, the San Francisco center of the book, what you've gotten taken out of the drawer. This is it on the press. This is, the guy helping me. Everybody helped me there. And these are the ones I want to keep, the ones I hope to do this summer. Constancia's story. I also have it backwards to help me when I go there so I can set it backwards. Antonia's story, Maria's story, the princess, Salvador. Once the surviving Africans landed in Liberia, they were as lost as when they reached Florida. Despite being on the African continent, it was not home. The colony, too, had to struggle to accommodate the large influx of new immigrants. The re-captives were apprenticed to Americo-Liberians to work and learn the ways of the colony. Under their contract, the American Colonization Society was to provide shelter, food, and clothing for the new colonists for 1 year. And I really love to know if that really happened. After that, they were expected to have become acclimated to the situation and able to manage from themselves. Of the 823 people who survived the crossing from Key West, as of March 31st, 1861, the last such record, 781 were still alive, integrating into the young nation's population. And this is a physician's letter. I won't read it, just attesting to how horrible the conditions were on that reverse middle passage. The lack of food they were provisioned with, the lack of medical supplies. It's a long letter on that ship, the South Shore. Not the Castilian, but on one of the other ships. They were all kind of terrible, but we have documentation. These are some pieces, just little sketches where I kind of even in my head was trying to tell the story. The Bogota was intercepted by the US Crusader. The people on the ship were from the Bight of Benin. They were sent to Liberia aboard the Star of the Union. So these are some pieces that I play with. Maybe I'll make some bigger or some textile pieces telling the story. The USS Wyandotte on its way to Cuba. The ship carried many sick children. The South Shore carried the people to Liberia. And the William, so telling this story. And then I think the last thing I can do, I know I've gone a long time, is this timeline. 1807, the act prohibiting the importation of slaves. Showdown between US and British over ship searches, 1858, August 1858. The capture of the Echo off of Cuba, 1858. Buchanan calls for Cuban annexation. November 1859, US Navy steamers Mohawk, Crusader, Wyandotte, and Water Witch are given orders to patrol the waters off of Cuba. 1860, March, Cuba squadron is given notice of the suspected slaver, the William. Mohawk intercepts and seizes the Wildfire. Mohawk arrives in Key West with Wildfire in tow. May 1st, first African dies in Key West and is buried there. May 4th, construction of barracoons. More ships, Wyandotte captured. Just this whole timeline. When a Wyandotte arrives in Key West. It's a lot of stuff. May 28th, a baby is born in Key West to a woman. May 30th, a contract is signed between the United States and the American Colonization Society to send the Africans to Liberia. And then by June 25th, 222 Africans are dead in Key West. The timeline goes on. So African Cemetery, Key West, it has these things. It tells us these things. It tells us how many people died in Key West. It forgets to tell us how many people died in Middle Passage. I put it up there. It forgets to tell us how many people died on the way to Liberia. It forgets to mention there was another ship. So here I've put in what I know. Say it'd be nice if you put that in, African Cemetery in Key West, but not yet. And that's my presentation. I know it's long, so I hope.
It
It
wasn't
was not
long. It was
It
long.
very
wasn't long at
interesting.
No, it wasn't.
it
No.
No, it was
wasn't long
very
at all. I think,
interesting. Oh my
yeah, you
goodness.
have you have everybody's attention. Don't feel at all that it
Definitely.
was long. It was very, very, very interesting.
Very
Wow.
intense. Very
Mm-hmm.
honest.
So I'll look at the question. I unearthed this story. You can see like by accident and with, help of articles, but the story is not told in the way I tell it. It's told usually as this story, like we liberated these people. Look, and it's really
Mm,
me a horror story.
yes.
And
Mm,
it's funny what you can leave out, right? It's not really funny, but it's
mm.
It goes to the depth of how little. I see Carl has his hand up already. Carl, you have a question?
yeah.
Yes, I just want to say wonderful presentation. I'm a historian. I'm from the Liberian Study Association. You're very accurate with the information. And also, I want to extend that you put this presentation for the 2027 conference. I just got back from the 2026 conference at the University of Massachusetts, and it was wonderful. And we're probably going to have it in Ohio State or at Cornell. And what I want you to do is, put in the presentation and also offer you to send it into our journal,
I'd
the
love that.
Library
You'll have
Studies
to help
Journal,
me.
so that it'll be there for posterity forever. The information professionally is not controlled by the United States or any people where they can corrupt the information. I do have a technical
Yeah,
question for you as a
yeah,
historian.
yes,
Now, you mentioned these ships.
yeah.
And I know probably by 1840 they do have steamships now. That makes a difference in terms of the speed you can travel back and forth to Africa. But I'm looking at your images. It seems like they were still using the old technology sail ships at the same time that the steamships were being
They're
around.
both
Am I
used.
right? Am I right? By 1860 they were still
Yeah.
using sail ships.
Well, they had both. You can
They had
see
both. Yeah, that's
if you
why because I was just looking at images and stuff like that. And I know that Cuba and Brazil, people don't realize, don't really eliminate slavery till really the 20th century. People don't
Mm.
realize that. I remember when I was 7 years old, I was reading something that they still had people that were formerly enslaved in Cuba and Brazil. Now, I just want to let you know anyway, the first boatload of Cubans were usually either ex-slave owner children that came to the United States, or they serviced slave owners. And Guantanamo Bay was used by the slave owners in Cuba to call the U.S. to get the newly freed Cuban slaves to continue to work in sugar and coffee. That's why Guantanamo Bay is there, you know, So, so I just want to put that out there. So we got politicians from Texas, from Cuba. That's why they act the way they act. I'm just saying that.
yeah, I mean, and we're still having
Secretary of State is Cuban. That's why they act the way they act. I'm just saying. All right, that's it.
can
What were you saying, Naya?
I put my email in the chat, so maybe you can help me know what to do to submit to that conference you were talking about if
Yeah,
you want
yeah,
to
it's
attend.
just online. It's just
Okay.
like a conference. It's just like
What's it called
we
again?
have it every year. You can just do online, Google Library Studies Association Conference. It'll come up.
Okay.
Okay, and you just submit. Usually around it'll probably be towards the end of 2026 where you can submit your information, and you'll enjoy. And a lot of your information obviously ties into what scholars are doing. And you're right, like they have a lot of people from the Congo. They never brought the people back to the right place, which is
No.
horrific. That's 1,000, 1,500 miles away.
Yeah. Not
That's
the
all.
same language,
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah. It's just like bringing a white-looking person from Turkey and putting them in Portugal.
Yeah.
Drop them. It's crazy. You know.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
So,
appreciate
I found it fascinating to watch how you go from an idea or an image into your actual artistic creation. Did anybody else?
Yes.
I was just really
Oh
moved by
yeah.
that.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I thought that was fascinating because, as a Black person, I trained in art also, but I've never thought about interpreting that aspect of my being, that slave aspect, the way you have. It's really beautiful and inspiring. Also, I have been to the African burial in Key West. I know two of the people that are responsible for the. Do you know Jean and Wallace Toomey?
I think I met them when I was in Key West because I did a lot of, as soon as I got there, I tried to kind of integrate a little bit in the African American community, like go to church. I was there for Juneteenth and I got good quick access to a lot of people. I even get like from church, it's so funny. Every Wednesday I get a text from the deacon. I
Oh
guess
my
I'm on the
goodness,
list. Like, how are you doing, Sister Patrinos?
that's amazing. But I just wondered if, because either earlier last year, I guess last year, every year they go out and they do this ceremony for the Africans in the ocean to commemorate the ancestry.
That's what I made, those prints, the one with the
Hmm.
three boats. I sent them to them to give them out at the Day of Remembrance. At that
Wow,
you're talking about.
phenomenal. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank
You have
you.
a hand up on an iPhone, but I have to tell you, my good friend from South Africa is online, and he's saying that this conversation needs to be expanded to Africa. So I'm sure Itumuling will talk to us in a minute. But first, let me go to, I don't know who that is on the iPhone with your hand up. Go ahead and speak.
Yes, this is Yolanda. I just wanted to make a very brief compliment to you, and I to say that I really well, the whole thing was powerful. It was a very powerfully moving presentation, and I couldn't even write anything while you were talking and presenting because I wanted to see it all. Okay, so I just like I can't put anything in the chat, but I wanted to say also that thank you for showing us your process of the artistic process because it's very different to see the finished product. We just look at things and oh, that's nice and so forth, but then to see your process was very meaningful to me to see your sketches, your beginning sketches, and then you're filling it in with paint and with color and so forth. That shows us all, it gives us a glimpse of the work and the love that you have dedicated to this presentation that you share with us. And so I want to say, Asante Sana, it's very, very moving. And it wasn't long, it was totally captivating. And I didn't want you to skip over things, but we'll be
Mm.
okay. Thank
Somebody
you.
I see her
told
putting
me
in the chat. Tell it all, share it all.
That's what I
I don't
said.
think
That's right.
you couldn't see that.
somebody
Naya.
told me that I need to make a book of
Mm,
this material, which I think is good. It's funny now that I'm home. I was in Philly with my mom and going to school, but even right now I have one now I have my babies with me,
mm,
I'm
Yeah,
back with
beautiful.
my pieces, and
Yeah.
I
mm,
just want to because I wasn't with them.
mm,
I wasn't with my babies when I talked last time.
Mm.
But now I have this is what these things are like,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's nice to be actually having them around me.
And she has dropped in the chat, everybody, her Etsy store, so you can buy some of those things if you're interested. Itamu Lang, can I get you? Itamu Lang, are you still with us? Yes, yes. I don't know. Is he still here? Not here.
One,
Did
Okay.
she, did she not?
Hi,
Um,
everyone.
oh, hi. So he's calling in from South Africa,
oh,
and he is a historian as well. Itumeleng, this is Lois's sister. We had dinner at her house on Thanksgiving when you were here in the States.
Oh, yes, yes. Oh, nice to
This is,
meet you.
yes.
Nice to meet you. Yes. Um, uh, uh, I'm, look, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because, I, one of the things that is very parallel, in a way is that when one looks at the missionary, because I work on missionary archives in the 19th century in South Africa, and one of the things was this idea of wanting to save Africans from themselves.
Mm.
You are heathens, you are this, you are that. We need to save you and send you to heaven and that type of a language, but also the language of wanting to portray us, because I read a lot of missionary biographies and so on. And one of the things is that there is very clear in terms of who they were writing for, those that were sitting in Europe, that they were basically even the so-called adventurers. They were basically telling them about the conditions in which Africans were living in, and giving very barbaric depictions of us in the manner in which they were doing it, and the manner in which you unpacked this whole thing. It draws some parallels, and I'm really interested in the women. I'm really interested in the women, and how they were treated, and how they found ways to make meaning of what they have, because in Africa women are the custodians of the culture.
mm,
Men are not. The custodians of the culture are women, and
mm,
women in Setswana, in my language, in Setswana, your aunt is an extension of your father, and your uncle is an extension of your mother. So, so the aunt is the cornerstone of the passing down of ritual, of traditions, and so on. So I'm just fascinated by how in those times, what were they doing to try and preserve the bit that they could, because they were the custodians. They knew the traditions. What did they do to try and preserve some of these traditions and cultures,
yeah, I mean that
including rituals, by the way?
yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
I don't know actually how I find that go deeper in that, but I love that as a question. But the reason why I try to like tell this white story, because I'm telling from the just like you and me about that colonial eye, that white eye of not understanding who these people were, not even trying to understand that they didn't bury people the way we think that they should bury them, and they don't treat the baby, on this guise of we're helping them. Actually, we only help them to what gratifies us. And without, just saying it like that, I tried in the presentation. I was gonna, because I thought I was going along, leave out that white story. But I think that white story is all we kind of can know about. They were they were somehow, I don't know, the women, the men, somehow they were doing whatever they could for their self-care, for their healing, to deal with this trauma. They were singing, they were dancing, they were moving, they were grieving.
Mhm.
And maybe these white people in Key West, white Americans, didn't understand what that was, but the fact that it is documented, then we can say we know that they had their way, which is deep rooted in us as the children or the ancestors of enslaved people. And so that's what I'm trying to do with that story. And also the story of the mother singing the song is bringing their humanity and saying there's a lot of stuff going on that we don't understand, but we know it. And also, we also carry some as African Americans, I think I do, we carry some of that white gaze and some of that othering ourselves. You know?
Yeah. I think maybe if you don't mind me, Helen, to maybe make it a little bit simpler for everybody to be in this conversation, is that missionaries were also perplexed by how we did our burials. Okay, the things that were put with the dead, why we buried the dead facing west, for example, and why women were buried in a particular space in comparison to men being buried in a particular space, because men will be buried in the crawl and all of those, and they write all of these things. But I'm really interested also because inside that white gaze, inside that white pen, there is our voice.
Yes.
There is our voice. And I think is how do we excavate that voice, in order that it becomes an alternative voice against the pen, because it is a very important voice that they were, I mean, they were doing observations and all of those things, but our voices were there,
Yes.
and it's the issue of excavating those voices. And that has been my passion in excavating our voices during colonialism and so on, because they were buried, our voices were buried through the pen. Even the replacement of our writing symbolic way of writing, replacing it with a Roman way of writing, or what you call Roman syllables and alphabets. So is that thing, I think, for me, how do we excavate it in order that we conscientize the young people today that our people were not just passive people. They did a whole lot of things, and they tried to bury that under the pen.
Yeah. And if there are specific holes that you see in the presentation where you think I can bring that forward more, please email me, because this is very much a work in progress. Like, nothing is done here. So that's something that I can, can make it, I can flesh that out. I welcome that. It's not finished. It's just the beginning.
I think you've done
I will
a
definitely connect the
fantastic job.
I will definitely connect the two of you, and I'm sure you're going to have a fascinating conversation. Thank you,
My,
Itabulang. What time is it in South Africa?
It's just going for 12 midnight.
Well, happy that you're stayed up with us. Thank you. We'll talk soon. Thank you. Shakira, you've been patiently waiting.
Yes, enjoying the whole conversation the whole time. I want to add to the accolades, Sister Naya, for the work that you have done. I feel like you have been channeling uh, uh, um, channeling relief. I think this is how it's hitting me, like channeling the relief of the trauma that lives in our bones, epigenetically. When I saw the images that you created of our ancestors who ended up on the bottom of the Atlantic, I have to say it brought back a vivid rush of memory for me when I was sitting in a workshop in New York for group, the International Black Summit, inconsequential. But the point is that we were going on a lunch break, and one of the lead facilitators, a sister, and there were 5 facilitators, 3 women, 2 men, no, 3 men, 2 women, and the sister said to us, and this gathering, we had kind of put together kind of a what do you call it, a memorial to our ancestors. Everybody was asked to bring something to, reflect your ancestors. And she said, I want you to, when you go out on lunch break, think about the ancestors, as you go on your lunch break. And I felt like, for me, this was just my experience, I felt like all of those bodies just reached up and grabbed my soul.
Mm.
And I started crying inconsolably. I couldn't stop myself from crying. I must have cried. I felt like I cried for about 30 minutes. It was probably more like 10. But I was inconsolable. I was weeping and sobbing, thinking about all of those people who died at the bottom of the ocean. And I think that there's some energy, some spirit that those people still have with us. I think I think the brother who just spoke, the brother historian who just spoke, just kind of touched on it. There's some way that our memory, your art, your work is kind of connecting us to our memories. And I do think it needs to be documented more formally, more broadly, and particularly at this time when we are, when at least I know I'm seeing people on social media, younger Black folk on social media, who are claiming, I don't know where this is coming from. It feels like COINTELPRO, but they're claiming that, we were never slaves. We didn't come from Africa. Black people were always here. I don't know where this fantasy is coming from, but the work that you're doing is helping to document for them in current time how we were taken. There was a crime, of trafficking committed against us, and it needs to be documented. I mean, and I think that the artistry that you bring to it, that you incorporate within the historical record, is so powerful. I mean, the tears in your
Oh,
in
yes.
your fabrics and in your imagery is just so powerful. I don't want to go on, but I just need to say that I feel like at this point, especially now, when we are fighting these demons, who I mean, they're doing their best to try to erase us. It's not going to happen. It would never happen. But I think the imagery that you bring to the battle is really so necessary. I mean, it's just I have more to say and I can't put it in words, so I'll stop now. But thank you.
I mean, I really
What you do to
appreciate
people,
that.
Nya?
I mean, I didn't set out exactly to do this work. I was doing a non-specific work about enslavement. And this is what I found. And it's becoming more and more specific because the first image I showed you, just the slave ship with the chain, it was not a particular slave ship. It wasn't a particular, but as I, learn more and just was like, I feel connection to these people. These people have got to be my blood because I feel like they want their story to be told. And they are part of me. That's why I always say in the presentation, our ancestors, our people, our Africans, because it's just how they are us, they are me. And it's so, to me, I know I talked a lot, but it's so apropos to what's happening now. People being deported to places they're not from, people being held in cages, just like nothing has changed. Or the people who came where they're like, well, you take them, sending people to Martha's Vineyard or whatever, Trump. I wouldn't be surprised if just somebody said tomorrow you're all getting deported to Liberia. That's what I feel is happening now, and that the history is just it's the same. And even in the monuments, there's erasure, right? Even in the cemetery at Key West, which I was so excited to be at, and then over time I realized how much erasure was there.
As Shakira was speaking, and even when you symbolize the ocean with red to represent the blood, the thing that occurred to me, first of all, that was fantastic. But I always think of when I love doing my little southern treks, and I always say, when other people look at bayous and rivers or whatever, they see beauty. I don't see beauty. I'm thinking, even here, living in North Carolina, I'm driving down the street sometime, and I just think about, our ancestors are at the bottom of these rivers, at the bottom of these bayous. And I look at the woods here and I'm thinking, they had to run for their freedom through woods and snakes. I mean, so we talk about the white gaze. They don't see what and maybe I'm melodramatic, I don't know, but I
Yeah.
don't enjoy any of those things because that's what I see. Shakira, thank you so much. I'm so glad you made it. We've got Lois. And Lois, I want you, if you don't mind, if you'll share your poem, but uh, I want you to speak. And then we have two hands that are up, so I want to get to them as well. So, hey, Sister
I,
Lois.
I put the
Itamuling, are you
poem.
still here? There's Lois.
Yeah,
Lois,
I'm here.
lift your camera.
Oh no,
Lift.
I'm lifted enough. And
You don't.
so,
Okay, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, I put the poem in the film of the poem in the chat. But I just wanted to say with Naya, what's so profound for me is watching her do her art, since she was a little girl. But what I got from this, and we've been in discussion with it, and which is why I literally asked her to create this conversation. One, I was so fascinated, and the level of scholarship, because when Naya does something artistically, she doesn't do things linear in a linear way. And what I sort of saw that what she's doing in her work, I'm calling them artistic liberation narratives. So because that's what in the work that she does, it's never linear. It's the endangered symbols, it's the story, it's the research, it's the scholarship, it is the emotions, the connections, the ritual, and I'm just so proud of her. But that's why, and I appreciate everyone here, because she really needs to hear how profound this is and how important it is, because one of the things that I loved about this is the uncovering narratives that have been, well, this one was washed over, you know what I'm saying? Some of them are buried over, some of them are burned, and this one was washed over. So I just, and for me, because I wrote the piece and they jumped into the water, this was such an alignment for me, because I have been connected with these ancestors who came to speak to me over 20 some odd years ago to tell me at Sonia Sanchez's reading. They literally jumped up and said, and they jumped into and they started talking to me. So I had to leave. But because our ancestors they're alive and well in our spirits, because they are us, they are part of us, and we are accountable and responsible to tell their stories and to uncover their narratives, particularly in light of the fact that we've been told anything other than liberation stories. We have all always wanted to be free.
Yes.
So just thank everybody.
Can I bribe you? Can I bribe you into reading your poem or no?
Let me just get
about it.
some water and I'll come if you want me
Okay,
to
you
read
get
it.
some
Okay.
water.
Give me
We'll talk
You
to
have to,
Stephen
okay,
and
Lois,
then
one second.
you owe it to me at least.
Okay.
Yeah, all
Give,
of
give me
us.
2 minutes.
We're going to talk to Stephen and then we're going to talk to Lola. Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm so glad to have found out about this conference even at the last minute. And I
Okay.
was in and out of the presentation because I had other obligations. But Miss Patrinos, this was really excellent in terms of how you have not only woven the story of your historic research, but also in reincarnated that in the presence with your through your art, but the art that is informed by our traditional imagery in terms of the veves of Haiti or of Adinkra symbols, but going back to Ghana and those not only textile traditions, but also other art forms there. So it is a weaving, a reconnection, a resurgence. It's so important to resurrect the memory that has been constantly misconstrued or obliterated. Particularly now, it's accelerating in this particular era with the kleptocracy we have in our government now. But um, I would really hope that you have a recording of this session and that you would provide links to us so that I know of people who live in Key West who may not be aware even of the history there, and this would really be important for my relatives who live in who migrated from Virginia up north. And I have relatives who come from New England who've migrated. And so I think this would really be important. But I really want to thank you for it on all of the work and the spirit that you've put into it, your work.
I
So
appreciate
you
I
know,
got recorded, right? Yeah.
yes. And Stephen, it will be posted on YouTube. And by virtue of you signing, anybody who's registered here, I have your email address and I will send you a link to today's program so you'll have it to share with others. Go
And
ahead,
and,
Naya.
and I say, Stephen, yeah, a lot of people in Key West, have this weird story I talked about in the presentation. They don't even think there was ever any enslavement there, even though the forts were built by enslaved Africans. I took an hour and a half tour of the fort, and they never mention that enslaved Africans built the fort. So my fantasy, my dream, when I get all this work done, and I know the curator at the studios of Key West, where residency is a phenomenal African American man, is when I get everything together, I'm hoping that I can get a one-woman show of all this work there, and it's really on my radar, and it's really I want that, and I have a connection to that African American community in Key West, and even they read Lois's poem, and they jumped in the water some at the Day of Remembrance this year.
Mhm.
And so we're trying, it's much easier to think, oh, we never had enslavement, right? That's a much nicer story,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not the truth.
Right.
And as you were speaking, because I've lived in Florida, I've gone to Key West several times. And I was interested, it was interesting to hear Charlotte say that she went to the African burial ground. I don't remember. Of course, it was years ago that I went to Key West, but I don't remember any mention of an African burial ground. So
It
that's
didn't get there
interesting.
until the 90s because all these
Oh,
bodies were under the sand and people had forgotten about it during the Civil War. And then they did this sonar, partly with the Corey Malcolm and then they found all the bodies and they realized there was like a tennis court there. And then that project was to make the African burial grounds there. And it's still some of the bodies are under the tennis court across the street. And there's like, I always like to say, I think it was people were paid like $1.50 to bury each African and maybe $3.50 for the coffin, but they're not even sure there were ever any coffins. So even in the burying of these ancestors, there's probably still scams and schemes.
Huh.
Sure, sure, sure. Lola, you have a question? Hi, Lola.
Yeah. Hi, how are you? And Sister
Good.
Naya, thank you so much for this presentation. As
Uh-huh.
I was watching, I kept saying to myself, and that was really what I felt, was that you were doing God's work,
Uh-huh.
that the people who had been dehumanized are now being humanized by you. Your art, I mean, speaks volumes. It's just incredible. Uh, And there was a sister earlier, Sister Shakiria, I think, and she was talking about how they tell all these lies, and now she's meeting young people who are talking about all, where they come from. They don't come from Africa and all that. I think what they've done to us as a people has made some of our children who don't know their history ashamed of themselves. And, you have to tell sometimes ridiculous stories to cover things up. But you're uncovering things that I think the more Black people know their history, the more they would realize they have everything to be proud of. When these women that you show, like the woman crying with her baby, that shows how human she was. The slaves were a lot more sophisticated than the enslavers, obviously. I mean, but they try to make them look like they're animals. They're describing people like monkeys and all. But when you look back now, it's reversed. They want to say they're not humans and they have not contributed anything to mankind. That's the purpose of all of that. We can't believe any of their stories if we can't believe even the ones that you're talking about now. They're mostly lies, and I think we should make it our business. Anytime they tell us stories that don't ring true, we should make it our business to find out the truth and uncover the truth. And I think this is the time. If we see what they're doing now in 2026, can you imagine what they did back then?
Yeah, that's amazing
So,
because even as you're talking, it's like to think that they can erase the history, like it's too late.
mhm. Yeah.
It's already documented, it's already out there. They cannot erase us, they cannot erase our history. They can try
Oh,
and tell it. I'm sure they're killing whatever they can in the Library of Congress, but
right. And they continue because even back then they were lying about stuff. They lied
yeah.
about things to justify what they were doing. And now, I mean, the biggest, like, one of the lies out there is to say that we did this to ourselves. Our ancestors sold us, so the white people are not responsible. So, like, when we think about it, like the people who were returned from this story, who were returned to Africa, they and their descendants went back to Africa. So their descendants are in Africa today. So by blaming your ancestors for what was done to us, they're really blaming all of us for having done this to us so that they will not be held responsible for what they did.
Well, and we can't have this conversation without talking about the General Assembly vote that happened a few weeks ago, where
Mm-hmm.
123 African countries voted well, not all African countries, 123 countries voted in unison that the slave trade was the worst act of inhumanity. And not surprisingly, three countries did not vote to support that, and that was the lovely United States of America, Israel, and what's the third one?
Argentina.
Argentina. I just went blank. Thank you. Um, and you know why I went blank? Because I think we focus so much on those three countries and the 54 countries, I think, in the EU, all who abstained from voting. But the real story for me is not them. It's the 123 countries that voted in unison. And if we could just look at that and understand that if we stand together, there's power in the 123 and stop giving attention to the outliers because that's what they are. They are coming to terms with the fact that work globally, they are outliers. I don't know. I've heard different percentages, 7, 8, 10% of the world is white. The rest of it is people of color, and that's their greatest fear. I'm going to put Osa on the spot. Hi, because his mother just spoke. So since we're doing sister, sister, Osa, are you there?
Hi, Miss Helen.
Hi,
Can you hear me?
sweetheart. How are you? Welcome home. Are you home or are you still in London?
I'm in New Jersey. Yeah, I'm based here right now. Yeah, yeah, thank you.
So you have any thoughts you want to
Uh,
share with our good sister here?
yeah, I did have a few comments in the comments. I just wanted to thank you, Miss Patrinos. It's really fantastic to see the way that you um like encapsulate the horrors of slavery through the visual component. I've been an educator in high schools, and I know that a lot of the kids aren't visual learners, and so being able to actually see the visual components is just really powerful, and it kind of stays with you in a way that just like reading something from a textbook might not. Just to actually see the horrors and be able to get it even from sometimes it's not enough to even see portraits of people, but to actually see like what their pain might have been, and you really doing a great job in showing what that suffering may have looked like. So amazing work. There should be more, this should be everywhere, really. So thank you. And I wanted to also say that, some of the things about people trying to present that, the slavery didn't happen in Key West is this similar type of thing that goes on in Britain. They like to say that that slavery took place in the British colonies, like the Caribbean, but not in mainland UK. But the truth is, you can even see it, like the 1500s, 1600s that there were runaway ads um, of freedom seekers in the UK that were originally enslaved domestic workers and stuff like that. And they tried to, comfortably get come with the idea that, the British Royal Navy was the one that was freeing the slaves and freeing and abolishing the slave trade in Africa, not acknowledging that they didn't do it for moral reasons. They did it for financial ones. That to replace the slavery with wage labor. Some could call it wage slavery, and just not really showing that their hand in it wasn't just to simply participate in it from afar, but they did it even in their own country. But they, like to do that to point fingers at everyone else. But yeah, thank
Welcome home. He's a student in London at Oxford. So yes, we're very proud of our son, right, Lola?
Yes. Hours.
Sonia,
Can
you
we
have a
hear
question,
can
and
we
then
hear
we're
the
gonna.
poem? Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna hear from Sonia, and then Lois, if you're ready, we'll hear your poem, and we'll let your sweet sister go. Thank you, everybody. I hope you're feeling the love, Naya, and the
Mhm.
um the importance of the work that you're doing. It's very
I
essential.
do. I
So
mean, it's very affirming. You guys really make me feel really affirmed and seen and valuable. So I appreciate it.
surely. Okay, Miss Sonia, you have a question?
I have a statement. We didn't all come to America 400 years ago. I am Catawba. My family has fought because my family was put out of the tribe for being too ethnically mixed. They moved us from our homeland in Fairfield County, South Carolina, so that they could excavate our precious burial mound. When they finally got the work done about 5 years ago, someone leaked a copy of the report to me. The central burial chamber contained a high-ranking female. She was from Sierra Leone, although she had lived on the eastern seaboard her entire life. She was from the Mende people. That is my oldest female DNA. And my family has fought South Carolina for access to our ancestral treasures, which no doubt are going to be shipped to some museum in Europe. She had been here since the 10th century. So, although I'm melanated, none of the people in my ancestry have come from Africa directly. They were just all here, and it shows in our DNA. So the young people have not lost their mind. They've learned about erasure. We respect our ancestries. We respect that the world was populated by melanated people, and we are no longer buying into African American as our beginning and 400 years ago as the time that we first put feet on this soil. So don't dismiss the young people who have access to archives that were hidden from us. We have been here. America has been populated in waves, but melanated people were all over the world, and the young people know that. So let's give them respect for looking beyond the palatable story that we were fed. Ashe.
Thank you. I respect that.
Ashe.
I will just say that there are probably, as you indicate, many stories, and there is no denying. I think the danger in what Shakira is suggesting, and is that the beauty of the work that Nya is doing is there's no denying that ships came from
We know the ships came, but we didn't all come on those ships. There were 13 tribes of Black Indians who went through 7 waves of war with the Europeans. And our people were shipped out of America just as people were brought in. And we have to know that too, that it's, it's been a back and forth.
I want to hear all stories.
Can I just say part of the reason, part of the what you're saying is absolutely clear. I mean, the fact is that we know that there are plants here, that there were relationships between between Native American countries, that Africans have been traveling the world since way before enslavement. But the whole point of this is that is part of the erasure. The erasure is not telling those stories, but African scholars have written about that. And that's what we have to understand, is that we don't have one single story. As the sister from I can't remember her name, but she said we're not a single story. Yes.
Chimamanda.
Thank you. And that is absolutely one part of the story. But that's not a story that's talked about in schools. That's not a story that's taught unless you actually do the work, and you have, and that's, I think, why the sister was talking about the fact that our children don't really believe the stories because they're not taught those stories. That's scholarship that ultimately scholars like Doc Ben, Sheikh Atadir, you have to read those scholars, and those scholars are not in schools. Those scholars, and I'm talking about Francis Quest Wellesley, those scholars have been just removed. In fact, many of them have been blacklisted. So we know, we know that's true, and we know that there are more stories than that. There's no way without our contribution beyond enslavement and before those colonizers came here, of which the natives should have built the wall, that I mean, so we're not discounting what all I'm saying to you is that we're not discounting what you're saying because we know that's a part of the rich history and the fact that it also talks about our compassion and the kind of people that we are because we were here and we didn't bring destruction. We actually bought we bought trade, we bought share, we bought culture, we shared that.
Yeah.
And you know, the Inca people, you can see all of that if we do the history and we really study. So that's, oh, my head is getting hot. I know the ancestors are up in here either saying shut up or do something.
No, never, never shut
Phone.
up. And I know Itamu is dying to say something very briefly so Lois can read her poem.
Yes, yes, no, no. And I want to I want to agree with Lois on this. He who controls the narrative controls the future.
Yep.
In our minds.
Yes.
And one thing for sure is I mean, I was never taught about whether it was Saharan slave trade or the transatlantic slave trade. When I grew up in South Africa during apartheid, it was almost like, you know, it's okay. You get blacks in the U.S. Okay, you get blacks in the U.S. And it's okay. And the idea that how they got into the U.S. It was or any other parts of the Caribbean was not. You know, I was never taught Haitian revolution. I was never taught that. I only came to learn those things by myself, exposing myself to the literature that which was sidelined and ensured that does not get into the hands of Black people.
That's right.
And one of the other things that we've got to battle with is the fact that we have, as Black people, we have not even dealt with the very issue of the state of intoxication, that which we find ourselves, whether in Harlem or wherever in the US, in South Africa, in Black townships and so on, the amount of alcohol, that is available there is aimed at one thing and one thing alone: erasure. Because if you are in a state of intoxication, you do not think. So that's what they did to our ancestors. They gave them alcohol in order that they do not get to the state of wanting to want to fight and fight for their own liberations and fight collectively. And it has always been part and parcel of the divide and rule. However, we have a rich history, and that rich history has been controlled by the one who's got the pen. And I think the challenge that Nya has put on us in terms of her art is that we have to take the narrative back. We have to take the narrative back, and we've got to tell the story as raw as it is.
Yeah.
We should not sugarcoat it, because if we sugarcoat it, we are not doing justice to the next generation. But I also want to end with this, that we are standing on shoulders of giants. That's who we are. We're standing on shoulders of giants. And that's what makes us different from whites. It makes us completely different from them, because they are the beneficiaries of a system that has always been created for them. We stand on shoulders of giants that have fought, but that have also brought civilization, that have pushed boundaries that which were always thought that we will never be able to push. And the narrative that says, oh no, you know, the first time an African put their foot in the United States was through slave trade is nonsense. We've got to debunk that and start saying that we were doing business across the Atlantic, across the Indian Ocean. We were doing business, we were trading. And that's what makes us to say that we are standing on the shoulders of giants. And that's what I want to
Steep
leave us
history.
with. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't believe I think I forgot to tell Peter to be on this call today. I'm kicking myself. But anyway, I'm just going to put Lois on the spotlight. And Lois, if you will recite your lovely poem for us, we will conclude the evening with that. Thank you, Miss Rice, for your comments. Appreciate so much.
And just can I just say that this is part of taking back the narrative is that we get to define our reality. And so, and that's for me, that's what part of this poem is about, is that we've been told that it was suicide when brothers and sisters jumped off the boat. For me, when I listened to these ancestors, what they reminded me of was the courage, that the resistance of deciding, well, this the poem will speak for itself, but part of it is that we are resilient and resistant in ways that they can't imagine. And as you said, standing on the shoulders of giants, and that's what my PhD is about, is that we are, as I say, we are the prototype of the archetype. And so this is called And They Jumped into the Water Some. Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. And they jumped into the water some, because they were brave heroes, warriors, and sheroes who knew, could see, on the blood-caught America, they would never be free. Spending a lifeline of lost time, trying to bind torn ties, fighting to right treacherous lies. So they jumped into the water, some, to greet the ancestors who had called, known, knew of Big Mama's dreams, fears, trials, and triumphs before boats, chains, and men, equaling savages and deeds done. They jumped into the water with babies in arms and bellies, in resignation to escape encapsulation, incantations, dissertations, and recitations of enforced dominations, sit-ins, water hoses, race accommodations, and too late justifications. And they jumped into the water some, to end the beginnings of dreams deferred, still unheard, and nightmares of double talk, pernicious lies, endless nevertheless, struggles, marches, riots, madness, and kings on corners, trying to fill space amidst trumped up trials and pick-a-nigger lynchings with enthusiastic ofays to queens, bearing mute few fruit and sustaining pain in hopes of here, there, and even ever after. So they jumped into the water and cried, demanding freedom, freedom, better days than those written, knowing as they knew always that no laws, cause, civil rights, or dispensed justice could unmask distortions, contortions, distorted on boats where, on docks where boats docked and locked minds, souls, drums, meet. But the beat goes on, the beat goes on, the beat goes on. Heartbeat, rhythmic dances to the tune of decay. The new way. Oh, my people, what a day. So they jumped into the water as she, Yemen Yashi, rocked on the shores, and he, Shango, sang in thunderous roars, knowing of this, that, and what would be, for she, African woman, had choice, voice. So they jumped into the water to be heard and told in tales of rebirth, restoration, reservation. And they jumped into the water to spirits become, so they could guide their lost relatives, Africans, fledgling souls back, 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 I say, to them real selves. Because they knew across coasts, continents, oceans, and seas that we would be embedded in the debt of atrocities. So they jumped into the water to speak and seek redemption in my goddess mother's house. Kneeling down to pray on the other side, they were chiding me and guiding me to search for better days and better ways of being and retrieving the me who I could love, I could see, and I could free. So they jumped into the water. Yes, they jumped into the water. I'm going to tell you one more time. They jumped into the water for every one of you. And thank you for me.
Beautiful.
Oh,
Beautiful,
wow.
beautiful, beautiful.
Powerful.
Thank you
Powerful.
so much.
That's
Lois is an
also
Thank you
actress,
powerful.
as
so
you all.
much.
You all
So
can unmute
powerful.
and give
Oh,
Lois some love.
Yeah,
oh
no,
my
no, that's very
goodness.
powerful.
Thank
That's
you.
really
So much.
powerful.
Thank
That
you.
was
Beautiful.
so
Yes, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
my
Thank you.
goodness.
Thank you, everyone, for everything that was shared today, for
Ooh.
sharing so much of yourselves with the rest of us.
Yes.
Goodness.
This was, for those who don't like hearing that this was better than church, I'm
Oh, well,
sorry, but this was better
This
than
was
church.
it was
church.
better than
This
church.
was
We have
church.
church here every Sunday
Yes.
at 4 o'clock, y'all.
I just want to say thank you, Louis, that every time I cross the Atlantic, I should at least take a moment and reflect. Take a moment
Absolutely.
and reflect
Mm.
and say they jumped. This
Yeah.
is where
Mm.
their human remains are. That is where their human remains are. But spiritually, they remind us all the time to
Mhm.
say
Because
we've
they
got to
knew.
go back.
They
Mhm.
knew. And
Yes,
they did it for us so that we
yes,
would remember. They were,
yes,
for me, they're heroes and sheroes.
yes.
Mhm.
They made
Yeah.
a choice, the
Mhm.
ultimate sacrifice.
If you guys look in the chat, Lois, I'm looking for the link that you put in earlier of your video of that so people can look at it again later. And while Lois, you can place that in the chats again. Naya, thank you so much. Do you have any parting words for us?
I just thank you so much for being so warm and welcoming. And you saw that when I introduced myself, I said Sister of Lois, and you all know why. So happy to
Now
be.
we wish you could meet your mother. My goodness.
And I welcome all the conversations. I put my email in the chat, and if anybody, it's work in progress. So if there are things that you feel are missing or you have some insights, you just reach out to me, because this is not just my story. It's all of our.
No, you have an official invitation. I've already said it on the chat. You have an official invitation to give a public lecture in my department in August. You've got an official invitation.
Okay, all right. Let me make
Yes,
sure I have
yes, you have
that.
an
Okay, I love
official
that.
invitation. Yes,
I
no,
love
no.
that. So
Yes.
I thank you. It's very humbling, but you're my sisters. That's my sister, and I loved how much everybody was engaged, and you gave me a
Mhm.
lot to go for, because sometimes doing work you feel like an imposter, you feel like, what am I, a crazy person, where's this coming from? But you really held me, and
Mm.
my sister always holds me, so thank you.
So, you're
That's
so
you.
wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you
Nya,
so
where are
much.
you located?
Well, that's a complicated question, but I live kind of in Los Angeles, but I'm also getting an MS in textile design in Philly. I started
Oh,
in January, so I've been living both places. I'll
oh,
be back in
wonderful.
Philly in the middle of August. And now I'm in
Oh,
LA, and I actually have an artist in residence in France. I'm going to be in France the month of July. I'm doing work on
wow.
endangered and extinct flowers, about climate disruption and loss. It's a lot about grief and loss, and how we're kind of losing the most beautiful parts of our planet. I'm making
Oh.
canopies for self-reflection, spaces for self-reflection in the botanical gardens there.
Did you hear about the I don't know what they call it, the regreening of they're building I heard they're building a wall at just below the line of the Saharan, trying to
Oh, I
stop
was
the
hearing
spread
some of
of
that.
trying to stop the spread of the Sahara, and they're building trees. Or, like, I don't know, I don't know how many countries are involved in that. That might be something to look at for you while you're over there.
I
Anyway.
mean, I want to hear more about, I mean, definitely that. And I want to finish this project. And then the project I'm going to work on in the fall in school is about the plants that enslaved Africans brought on their bodies across Middle Passage. I'm going to do,
Mhm.
that's my fall project for school. And then this
Yeah.
is like my, my life.
Okra and watermelon. Yeah.
Busy, busy woman. Lois, you want to give your sister some accolades before we sign off? And thank you so much for reciting your poem. You
Mhm.
get into a space when you do that, so thank
You,
you.
only you, Helen. Just
So yeah,
she's one of my sheroes,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
yeah, and just to walk with someone. I mean, I've been committed. You see, my
yeah.
ancestral altar. I've been committed um, to bringing forth or making visible the stories and particularly of African women sheroes, and to walk side my sister as she continues those that conversation of, yeah, I mean, just bringing forth those stories. I just love the idea of working with her, and yeah, I'm all emotional. This is
No,
my
because I ain't
this is
never seen
my
you speechless
no,
ever before.
this is my this is the I have a mentee that calls Naya the one that was put here special for me,
Mhm.
and that's who she is.
Well,
So
I'm absolutely pleased to have met you, Naya, and thank you so much for giving of your time to meet with us today. It was captivating, as I told everybody it would be. Um, we will put this on YouTube. Lois will edit it for us first. Got an assignment for you, Lois. Um, and just thank you and keep up the work and your level of commitment, and both of you, the passion that you have for this subject is just, what we need. And at this time is exactly what we need. And Miss Rice, your story is important as well, because we do need to know that, we need to know the whole story. And it's
Yes.
very convenient to tell some stories. And the inconvenience one is that we were already here, that we were more civilized, and that the culture that they use today, they stole from us still. So please know that your story is important as well. Ita Mulang, I love you, my darling. Thank you for staying up with us, and we'll have you back. We'll have you back. But anyway, I'm gonna take ourselves off of spotlight, and we can do our thing that we do. Everybody, if you can unmute yourselves, and we can do our sign off and call it a night. And I put in the chats, we're going to Ghana. So if anyone is interested in joining us in Ghana, please reach out and let me know, and we can make that happen. So if you can all unmute, those of you who are new here might not know what we're about to do, but everybody else does.
Well, Helen, can you
So
just tell Miss Rice I'd like to connect because I think we need to document your story. Okay.
we can make that happen.
Okay.
We can certainly make that happen. Okay, so when this has been a gathering that I'm so happy that we were able to have, and as we say with our every week in our closing, when Black women gather,
Amazing things happen.
Amazing things happen.
Yes.
Amazing things
things
happen.
happen.
Meditational
And this has
brother.
been,
Thanks, everybody.
thank you all for
Peace
another
and blessings.
I can
amazing
come to South Africa
Sunday.
too.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing the recording.
Yes.
Helen.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'll share it with everybody on an email who was on this call. I'll send it to anybody who's in the Google group. So those ladies of you who are on here who are new, we have a Facebook page, we have a Google group, we have Wednesday morning, 6 a.m. Meditation and yoga and mindfulness, and you're more than welcome to join us. And you will all get a copy of the video from today. So on that note, I'm going to stop recording and just say thank you all again. And anybody who wants to send a donation, I graciously accept them.
Yes.
And let me,
Thank you,
Thank
Helen.
you.
yes,
Thank
thank you
you.
guys. You
Thank
guys are
you.
wonderful.
Thanks,
I'm
Helen.
not going away. I'm just going to stop the recording.
Thank you,
We can
Miss
chat
Lynn.
for a few more minutes.